Hey loves, we're Maria and Nicole, two 30-something relationship and sex therapists, and this is Relationally Speaking. We're cutting through the small talk and getting unfiltered about love, dating, sex, and intimacy. We're here to make those uncomfortable conversations we've tiptoed around just a tiny bit more comfortable.
Hi, welcome back to Relationally Speaking with Nicole Ness, a certified sex therapist, and
Maria Sosa, licensed marriage and family therapist. Welcome back to another episode of Relationally Speaking. I'm Maria, and as always, I'm here with Nicole. And today we are wrapping up our 4-part series on desire discrepancies in relationships. And we're ending with a topic that might be a little bit surprising, a little bit controversial, but it's the idea that too much closeness can actually kill desire. Let me break that down. For the most part, we think that intimacy is something that we should constantly be striving for more closeness, for more connection, more emotional transparency. That's usually what we see on social media. I talk about it all the time. And of course, those things are essential in a relationship. But when it comes to sexual desire, which again is the theme of these last 4 episodes, sometimes it's actually the very thing that suffocates that attraction.
And I think that's so counterintuitive to what we think. Like you said, we teach our clients and we talk about emotional vulnerability and building up quality time and connecting, right? And so like when we offer this idea of separation, essentially is what we're getting at, it can sound really ironic, right? But it's a really important distinction here that, we assume that the closer we are, the more desire we'll feel, right? Not necessarily how desire works. And this is something that Esther Perel, she is fantastic. If you don't know her, she's like relationship, sex, intimacy guru. I would kill to just have a glass of wine with her and talk her ear off and listen to her. Actually, listen to her. I don't want to talk. I want to hear everything she has to offer. But she talks about this a lot in her book, Mating in Captivity. Such a goodie. Every bit of it is just so juicy. And she argues that love and desire, they thrive off of really different things. So love really thrives off of closeness and safety and security and predictability and like the cozy, right? It's like the sweatpants and we're on the couch together in our shared blanket and this is love, right? On the other hand, desire feeds on this distance, this mystery, this uncertainty, like a little bit of this unknown.
Yeah.
So today we're going there, right? Kind of unpacking how this all plays out in relationships, why certain things intensify this struggle and kind of dampen desire, including the pandemic. I know that it feels so far behind us, but the effects are kind of residual and still at play when it comes to desire. And essentially, how do we create space, right? How can we consciously create distance with our partner?
Yes. And I know that, again, thinking back to the episodes that we have had before, we've talked about how closeness is kind of like a precursor to that desire. And I won't want to have sex unless I feel close to you because I feel disconnected from you. So yes, there is a little bit of nuance in terms of so many things are happening and we're, complex humans. But what we're speaking to essentially is this sense that it's a paradox. It's a very big paradox between this idea of love and desire. Again, we know that relationships need this sense of trust, of emotional closeness, of security, and those are the foundations of long-term love. Again, I'm using the word love here, not desire, because when we look at what actually fuels desire, it's usually the opposite. So there's a certain tension, the sense of longing, a feeling of separateness. So the longing is for something that you don't already have, or this tension between something that you want. If you already have it and the love is there and we're feeling very secure, feeling very connected, what role does desire play in that if the desire is fueled by tension, longing, and this space?
Yeah, and I think, that is really where people get stuck. And I even think about one of my biggest fears in a relationship was actually getting into the relationship. And I know that sounds so backwards, right? Because once I'm in it, I should feel secure and safe and comfortable and all the things, which I did. But in my mind, it was, well, how could you still want me? You're not chasing me anymore. There's no dance, there's no tension, there's no longing, there's no texting when we're both out kind of drinking and flirting with each other and then finding each other at the end of the night. There's none of that anymore, you know?
Mhm.
And it's so interesting. And I hear the same thing in the client space sometimes of, once I'm in this relationship with you, something feels different. And they can't quite put their finger on it. But I think it is that idea of like, now I have you. And Esther puts this so much more eloquently than I can. And I don't even have the quote in front of me, but she essentially says something around like, none of us have our partner. Like, we don't
Yes.
own our partner. We don't own their sexuality. Like, they are a part of our life. But at any time, they can renew their attachment to us or not renew their attachment. Like, we don't own them.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important too. When we get in a relationship, there is still no certainty, but I think oftentimes our mind conflates, I'm in a relationship, therefore I have you, therefore the longing is gone.
Yeah. And that's a really hard one because we want to feel like we are in secure relationships, but it's an illusion. I genuinely think it's an illusion of 100% being secure because, yeah, we have no control over whether this person ends up falling out of love with us, if they end up wanting something else. We want to feel like there is security, and it is important to feel that security, but it's
Hmm.
never 100%. Like, that's just not a guarantee.
Yeah.
It's not a thing that we can actually give, and to try and find that and to try and feel that way, it's just not realistic. So it's almost kind of like, no, you can't have that. But yes, you do need to find some sort of security because if not, then you feel like you're constantly kind of functioning from this place of survival. And, that's not a good place to say. But the quote that you didn't have that I think I might have that, I kind of have it, not memorized. God, that'd be really cute if I just have Esther Perel quotes memorized. But she says that love enjoys knowing everything about you and desire needs mystery. So love likes to shrink the distance that exists between me and you while desire is energized by it. I don't know if that's a quote that you were thinking about, but it's pretty, on board with everything. Yeah, 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 yeah. And that's essentially why early relationships often feel so exciting because when someone is still a little bit unknown to us, we fill in the gaps with that fantasy, that longing, and imagination. And it's really fun to not know these things. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about that person and what they're doing and what they could possibly be feeling. That's part of that fantasy, that longing, that wanting. But when we become fully intertwined and when we are in this committed relationship and we feel very close emotionally, mentally, logistically, we lose that space for desire to breathe because we also think we know everything about this person, which is not true, right? Like, I know you already. I know exactly how you're going to respond. I know. And so we create the story that we know this person so well, which is not the same as at the beginning of the relationship when we're just getting to know this person and there is the space for fantasy, longing, and imagination. So we lose that naturally as the relationship develops.
In this beginning stage, when we first meet somebody, to your point, like, you don't know everything about them. You hardly know much, truly, right? You know a little bit, you know the surface level details, you know a little bit about their family, but you don't have access to them all the time in the same way that you do, or it feels like you do in a longer term relationship. And that's where so many of these long term couples kind of hit this wall, right? I still love you. I still want to be with you. There's no question about the amount of love in my heart for you. But that like erotic tension, and I don't know if couples are using the term erotic. They might say passion, they might say desire, they might say fire, right? But it disappears because there's not space between me and you. Like, we exist together as this unit, which is a beautiful thing. And I do love this idea of this unit and team mentality. But when excessive and when I don't know where I end and you begin, that's where desire it it fades. It doesn't have room to just to breathe, you know? And I think this is where a lot of people start to, wonder, does this mean there's something wrong with my relationship? Have we lost our passion? Will we never get it back? And what's really happening is again, this totally normal, natural shift. These stages of a relationship that every couple will have to confront and move through at some point. And I'm going to take a few of these and, Maria, chime in and fill in the blanks here. But, those first 6 months are this like moon landing phase, is what we might call it, right? The honeymoon phase is what other people might call it, where everything is exciting, right? Because it's new, it is shiny. We don't know anything about this person yet, and we have everything to learn in the world, right? So we're so into this person. It's the getting the text, like we hear the beep and our heart is fluttering and we like race to it. Like it's so fun. You want to spend all your time together. Things feel in total alignment. You feel like you found your person, right? We start to enter into phase two, right? This 6 months to 2 years, this exploration phase. So that spark, right? That like desire, it's still there, but reality kind of starts to set in.
Mhm.
You see each other a little bit more clearly. Flaws, quirks, maybe you fart for the first time in front of each other, or maybe that's a little bit later down the line. But like that's what I assume is part of this phase, is you're starting to see me as a human and not just this like shiny new thing that is really lustful,
Yeah.
right?
I
So
think in that
yeah.
piece also, like that's when the annoyance comes in. Right, when like the little things that they do that were so cute at first, again in the moon
Uh-huh.
landing or the honeymoon phase, now you're like, oh, that is so annoying. Like that drives me up a wall. And I can't
Yep.
believe that this thing that I thought was cute because it was so different from me also, right? Like there's this essence that within that the moon landing or the honeymoon stage, you're like, they do this one thing that's so different. And isn't that cool? Like that they're so organized and I'm so messy. It's so cute. And then you get to like the real part of the relationship and you're just like, that is so annoying. I am so annoyed by this one thing that you were doing that is so different than the way that I would do, which is, kind of like when the conflict starts, just because you start to notice these differences that are shifting. Person probably hasn't changed. Your perception of that behavior has changed. And now it's quirky. Now it's annoying. Now it's a little bit different. And so that's what we mean when we say things just got real. It got real. It got real.
Yeah, this person is a actual human who is capable of pissing me the F off. Then, we move into like this post 2 years. We've adapted, right? Like we are settled into a rhythm. There's a routine. We know each other's habits. We know how we operate and the systems in place. And we're trying to, in this phase, kind of maintain what it means to be a couple and maintain this relationship without losing ourselves, essentially, right? Like, do I still feel like my individual sense of self? Do I still do the things that I like that I was doing before I even had you in my life while still showing up to this relationship? So it's really all about adapting in this phase.
So do we make it past the I'm so annoyed by you and I'm kind of adapting to the things that you do that are annoying? Like, am I making peace with the way that you load the dishwasher, which is like so annoying and whatnot? Like, yeah,
Yep,
yeah, okay.
we've all
So
been there.
yeah, we've all been there. And then I guess that kind of gets us to the commitment phase, which is beyond that 2 year mark. And that's where love becomes a choice. It's not just the feeling. Again, very easy to fall in love and to be in that stage. It's a very different place or a different point in the relationship to choose to stay in love. Like it doesn't just come naturally. You're fully accepting each other, you're seeing these flaws, you commit to making the relationship work, you are putting in the effort. I don't love the idea of like putting in the work because I don't think everybody loves their work. So if you're like, oh, my relationship is work, then essentially you're equating it to something that you don't always particularly like. And it feels like a lot of effort and it feels like you're just, pushing this rock up a hill. I'd like to think of intentionality. I like to think of how intentional are we with each other? Are we thoughtful? Do we take each other into consideration? Do we go out of our ways to make sure we remember things that are important to our partner? So I think that this commitment stage is where we're not just cute anymore. We are like actively trying to be cute and to do cute and thoughtful things for each other. And then if we move past that and we're kind of like at the 5 years, plus mark, we're at the acceptance stage. And at this stage, your bond is pretty deep and steady. You've seen each other at your best and your worst. You've been through a few things. And instead of trying to change each other, you're embracing who you are and you're accepting that's my partner. They are annoying and I love them with their quirks, and I'm never going to change the fact that I find them annoying. But this is the person that I want to continue to do life with. And maybe it's even a benefit to me because I've reframed their annoying Tetris game, in terms of putting away the dishes as like really beneficial to, water conservation. Who knows? You make up,
Right.
right? You make strategy as to why this is actually of benefit to you and to the relationship. But there is very much this sense of security and acceptance and appreciation for the things that are happening. And I just want to highlight that it doesn't mean that like these things happen at these 5-year marks. Like some people never get there, right? Like you may be 10 years in the making and you have not accepted your partner and you have not understood that the way that they are is just the way that they are, and you continue to fight that. So I think that these are more developmental stages in terms of growing in the partnership versus how long you've actually been together.
Shameless plug to my husband, if you're listening, I will never stop scraping my teeth on my fork when I eat. This is something we are at that 5-year point, but I'm gonna have to accept this.
Mm.
I try, right? But shameless plug, if you're listening, I will probably do it again tonight over dinner.
Yeah. And I guess that whole part two of that is, can we accept that? Like, do we see that as, okay, that's my partner and they have so many other amazing qualities, which you do, that offset the minor annoyance? Because I'm also annoying. I really think we also need to look at ourselves and be like, oh God, I'm annoying too, right? If we find our partners annoying, then and you're not looking at yourself and being like, I'm annoying too, then you're missing definitely 100% the part that is, it's key. It is key. You are annoying too.
Yep.
Yeah. So kind of looking at that sequence through the developmental stage as relationships move from that commitment stage, which is stage 4, and into that acceptance stage 5 phase, it is very common for desire to shift or decrease. So the intense passion of the early days, the excitement of that unknown, the thrill of that discovery, it just settles naturally into something more predictable and stable. So while this is normal and that is what is to be expected, it also goes back to our initial point that too much closeness, too much coziness can really stifle that desire. And again, at the beginning, it was natural. It was a natural part of the relationship. And we had that space. You didn't live with each other. You had systems in place, structures in place that meant you weren't on top of each other 24/7, which is, I think, what we saw in the pandemic also, when not we didn't even have the workspace to create natural space between the home and the work, but it was, we are with each other 100% of the time. We are here and God, I cannot stand to be anywhere near you. For some people, it was the opposite. It was great. We actually get to spend a lot more time with each other. But I think it does, regardless, speak to this big overarching theme, which is, yeah, space is good. We want space. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because the pandemic, I began dating my now husband at the start of the pandemic, like literally like 3 months before it. And in so many ways, I think that strengthened our relationship. If I really look back, like we got to have deep conversations. We were not distracted by going out in Chicago and the busyness of Chicago. Like everything was shut down. So like our dates looked like a lot of cooking and a lot of nights in and a lot of movie nights and a lot of good convos, while driving just to get out of the house. And that was beautiful and truly set like such a good foundation. But we did get to miss that component where I got to invite him into my life, who I was, what I did with my time, how I navigated my world, and I didn't get to really be invited into his because literally we were inside, we were quarantined. So on one hand, it like really strengthened this communication bond and like again stripped away distractions. And also, we had to then invite each other in like 2 years later
Mm,
into all those pieces that we just didn't get access to in those first two
mm,
years. So,
mm.
I say that and it kind of points to some of the research too behind this. Obviously, there was research done during this time around the pandemic and relationships, and one in particular around sex. Found that for many couples, sexual frequency and desire really dropped during the pandemic. And a huge part of that, to your point, was due to this forced closeness. I'm in this space with you from morning until evening. You see me in the same sweatpants I woke up in that I might go to bed again in. And there is just this one day blurs into the next. And I think at first you might think, oh my God, all this closeness, working remotely, so much time for a little like midday rendezvous. And that just didn't, for the most part, according to the study, did not actually end up happening.
One of the main findings from the study that you're mentioning actually is that the more time couples spent together, often in these really confined spaces and under a lot of stress due to pandemic related challenges, the less sexual desire that they reported. Because normally couples have time apart to go to work, to socialize, to engage in hobbies. So these periods of separation actually help to maintain a sense of intrigue and independence. Again, that longing, that space to reconnect, which feeds into desire. But when the world pretty much shut down, partners were spending nearly every single moment together. And a lot, if not most, of those moments were filled with stress, anxiety, or just the monotony of daily life. And that can be very exhausting. It can be very stressing to just feel like every day is Groundhog Day and you're just kind of going through it. And this is terrible. And that really highlights the stress onto the relationship as well, right? Like all the stress that we're feeling, it's very easy to put that into the relationship.
And another thing, kind of to think about is like this erotic energy. And this is not me saying this. This is our girl Esther. Because this is all kind of her. She really pioneered this
Oh my
topic,
God. We did.
right? She hit this. But she said erotic energy needs distance. It needs to be cultivated. When you're with your partner 24/7, there's no room for anticipation and for longing.
Mhm.
And I don't think anything could be more spot on than that, right? So this is really hard, not only like during the pandemic, but think about couples who have kids or those that work from home in small spaces, and there's just not really room to move without like hitting either literally or emotionally or metaphorically into your partner,
Mhm.
right? And so, I think even out of pandemic, like this idea of separation is so important, this proximity versus distance. I can think of a couple I worked with who spent a lot of time together. I mean, pretty much all of it. And super close on the surface, you'd think they're so solid. Their foundation is so good. But I remember one time in one of the one-on-ones I had with her, she said, we'll wrap up our day, and I'll say, "So what'd you do today?" And then I think, well, he was with me all day, so I already know what he did all day. He went to the grocery store with me, and then we walked through the park, and then we grabbed a coffee, and now we went home. When I asked him tomorrow, it's going to be the same thing. And it just really emphasizes this idea that there's not any, we lose even things to talk about. And desire also is so fueled based off of conversation and communication and feeling connected. But the closer we are, ironically, actually can produce disconnection.
I love that. Again, we have paradox of like, but that doesn't make sense because the closer that I am, the better, right?
Yeah. Especially too with this couple in particular, or most of us during the pandemic, like our partner became our coworker, right, who worked in the room next to us, the makeshift office as we were kind of posted up on the couch in the living room.
Yeah.
Could become your emotional support system, your Netflix buddy, the person you have dinner every night with. And so where does desire fit into all of that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to kind of fit into that. And you're again talking about how our partner became the coworker, the parenting helper, your co-parenting, emotional support system. Because we were so isolated, this person played so many roles. And even when we're not isolated, we also still have the expectation that our partners are going to be everything. You are supposed to be everything. And the reality is that your partner cannot, nor should they be your everything, because it's literally impossible for one single person to fulfill and fit into all the roles in your life, right? So I want you to be my best friend, and I want to talk to you about all the things. And also, I need you to respond in the way that my best friend would respond, because
Mhm.
she gets it and she knows exactly what to say. I need you to also be, not to use the word provider, but I also need you to be the leader. Like if we're going for very heteronormative kind of roles, I need you to be the leader of, this household. And I also need you to be fun and playful and sexy and to want me and to be like, there's so many needs that we have, and to try and put that all together into one perfect human is just not reasonable.
Yeah, and I think too with that, like not only can our partner not be our everything, at least not to the full extent maybe we're expecting or wanting them to be, but we have to check in too with like, how do I explain this? If I want my partner to be my emotional support system, my caretaker, I'm over here happy that that role is getting met for me and I feel so fulfilled. But how is that actually impacting my partner's desire of me as they're playing that caretaker role for me? And that's the question we're not asking. And so I think about another client situation where essentially one is really happy to play more of an emotional support person. They tend to, that is the role in the family of origin. They tend to be really good at it. But I had asked in one session, do you feel like you're caring for this person? Like I care for you, right? So I'm going to do these things that we're taking care of. And it
Hmm.
fell into the latter.
Yeah.
And when we're taking care of somebody, that in itself, they unintentionally become smaller in our eyes or lacking autonomy or lacking independence. And so we have to ask, like, in these roles that I'm asking you to play for me, and there are some basic ones, fundamentally, we should be getting certain needs met from our partner. But we need to be asking, when I put you in this role as my best friend, a confidant, and my gossip partner, how does that impact your view of me in this moment?
Mm.
We fail to ask that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I don't know if we were talking about because we have 1,000 conversations and we're always talking about, not only our personal relationships, but like we consult with each other in terms of cases, but it changes the dynamic, right? So when I met you, you were super independent, and that was probably one of the things that I loved about you. You were empowered and this go getter, quote unquote. And now that we're in a relationship, now you want to be not cared about, but taken care of. And so now I don't see you as this independent and, let's go, let's get it. Now it's, can you do that for me? Or can you obviously there's always reasonable ways in which we end up taking care or caring for our partners, but when we really shift the dynamics and it's take care of me versus I'm taking care of myself, or we are individuals that are independently taking care of each other, then that really changes the dynamic and it changes the way that we desire each other.
Oh, absolutely. Also, like, I know we talked a lot about pressure in our previous episodes in this desire series, but putting that on our partner creates so much pressure,
Mhm.
right? When our partner has to fulfill every role, every emotional need, every social need, that relationship ends up feeling like a job. So, to your kind of comment about it feeling like work, well, guess what? It does feel like work now, right? I've been assigned this role and I need to show up for this job.
Mhm.
And that's not really where passion thrives, right? Is when your partner is this person that you go to for venting and logistics and stress relief and emotions. And then you're supposed to switch and see them as an intimate partner too, the person you want to have sex with. Wires are crossed, at least for me.
Yes, wires are crossed, and we expect ourselves to just be able to switch back and to be able to be like, yeah, I am all of those things. And want me. And so when that doesn't happen, there's of course a sense of disappointment and a bit of resentment because we can't really see how it's hard for us to see or to understand that no, it's not possible for one person to meet all of our needs all the time. And if we expect them to, we're setting ourselves and them up for failure because inevitably they're going to fall short in some areas. It's just not possible to maintain that. And that's going to create frustration, disappointment, or even a sense of resentment instead of recognizing or understanding that some needs are meant to be met outside of the relationship, right? So we have to outsource some of this through our friendships, our hobbies, our own personal growth. There's so many other ways in which we can get these needs met because our partner can't be everything to us.
Yeah. And I think with that, we're also doing ourselves a disservice if we put all of this pressure on our partner, right, to fulfill all these needs. Kind of dampens our own growth. When we expect our partner to be our everything, we kind of risk losing our sense of self outside of the relationship. You're the person I go to regulate. You're the person I go to problem solve. That begins to look a little bit like codependency.
Mhm.
And there's something about that it just feels unattractive. It is unattractive, right? And desire feeds on separation. It feeds on seeing our partner as this autonomous, this individual, this person separate from me with their own thoughts and experiences and feelings and perspectives. And what happens, unfortunately, is we often merge a little bit too much. And we don't realize when we're merging because it happens to feel really good actually at first. It feels really cozy and comfortable.
Yeah.
But we risk losing this sense of individuality. We risk losing who it was that we actually brought into the relationship
Mhm.
when we end up overlapping just a little too heavily with our partner.
Yeah, and you bring up such a great point because it does feel so good. It does feel so nice to be seen, to be known, to feel the sense of coziness and security. That is really nice to feel. And unfortunately, it just has, kind of like a different impact for that desire piece. So you may be feeling super secure, super in love, and that might not translate into I want you, I desire you, and I want to have sex with you. So that kind of brings us to this big question, which is okay, so there's a lot of love, there's a lot of security in my relationship. So, how can I rekindle this sense of desire by creating space with my partner? Naturally, again, it's happened. It's probably not that it's a good or bad thing because we don't like to label it, but it's nice, right? You have all these really great things. There's so much love. So now let's work on that desire piece and let's see what we can do there. So the first thing that we want to do is to create anticipation. We talked about how that anticipation was naturally happening at the beginning of the relationship because there's this kind of buildup, this sense of when am I going to see you next? Or when are they going to text? Or when are they going to be there? Like you want to spend time with them and you want that closeness. So that anticipation is great. So we're going to create some of that buildup by flirting more. We are going to send suggestive texts during the day. We're going to talk about what you want to do to each other later. Again, things that happened very naturally at the beginning of the relationship. It was easy. Like you knew that you wanted all of these things with this person. So that's still there, but we're not following through on any of the behaviors that create that sense of anticipation. So it's really helpful to create that, to create an environment where that can happen, which means that we also need to spend time apart. So in order for that buildup to exist, we do need to spend time apart. We want to have separate hobbies. We want to take solo trips or just carve out time where you do your own thing or go have boys' nights, girl nights, friend nights, whatever it is that you need. The goal here is to create moments where you can actually miss each other. This idea of missing each other is actually a really good thing because that's where the desire comes from. That wanting, that missing each other, that is essentially where it begins. That's the fire. The desire and the time apart cannot they have to coexist. They have to be working together.
We also encourage limiting roommate talk. We've all been there. It's really easy to fall in that. Desire doesn't live in logistics. It just doesn't. And so of course, like bills and errands and chores and what time are you going to be done with work tonight? Or what's the plan for this weekend? Or, stuff like that is obviously necessary to talk about. But there's just so much focus on roles in that conversation, who's doing what and when, and who's assigned to this task, and being this co-manager in your home, that you kind of forget to spend time with who your partner really is. There's so much focus on these logistics. So we really encourage setting time apart to connect on things that don't even touch logistics. And it's interesting because sometimes couples will find, well, what the heck do we talk about? And so it might feel nerve-wracking at first or uncomfortable, but there are so many wonderful ways to kind of bring up conversation that feels a little bit unnatural. There are like card decks. You can bring in like couples card decks. We're Not Really Strangers is a great one. Esther Perel does have a deck. I can't remember what it's called. But you can bring in, like, outsource this stuff. If we're kind of in this like conversation rut, feel free to outsource it. The alternative of like not talking at all is not an option. Outsource it. Share old stories about when you first started dating to kind of like remind yourselves of the time before we became roommates, and engage in play. So that's another piece, right? Try something new together. Play decreases pressure, which we know, he keeps saying it, really has a huge impact on desire. If we feel pressured, we don't feel desired. If we feel play and like levity and lightness and newness and a sense of silliness, desire has room to grow. Desire really does get kind of buried under routine. So we're going to want to kind of interrupt that a little bit with changing up the setting. Plan an unstructured date. I'll tell a couple to get on the train system in Chicago and just get off at a station. A neighborhood you know a little bit of in Chicago, but get off and see where the day takes you. Hop into that coffee shop you haven't been to before. Instead of going to the one that makes that great cappuccino, go somewhere else. Bring out the board game that's been collecting dust in a shelf. Set up an email account between the two of you where you just play on it and send going back to the logistics piece, nothing about bills. You are just sending emails and talking that is completely separate from your work email and from your text messages that are just inundated with logistics and the day-to-day. But we've got to shift something up is really what we're getting at.
I love that. I had never thought about setting up an email, like a new email for each other, where you can send each other new things. That is super thoughtful. I really like that idea, and I'm definitely going to be using it with some clients who I think would benefit, because their life has essentially become roommate talk and parent talk, and everything is logistics. And I did send them off with a card deck actually to dinner so that they couldn't talk about logistics, and it was really awkward and it was really uncomfortable, and it wasn't all that enjoyable at first. And I think that, the more that they were able to kind of lean into that and do things a little bit different, then they were able to tap into this sense of mystery, or embracing a little bit of that mystery. So we want to create space for our partner to surprise us. So we want to keep something private so that we can get curious again. And we want to remember that security and safety and eroticism and desire can all exist alongside one another, because they are not mutually exclusive.
This makes me think two things came to mind. One, Maria and I had a dinner date in person back in the day when we first met. Maria did this amazing thing where she brought a card deck to dinner. Do you not remember this? You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
No. I remember exactly. I didn't have the card deck because it was on my phone. So I was literally through questions on my phone, but it was like the version of the card deck on my phone. Yes, correct.
It was just the best. Like, Maria and I don't have any shortage of conversations.
No.
And we wanted to bring in something and be like, okay, let's bring in, a more vulnerable question tonight. And it was just this awesome moment where I learned so much of you. And I already knew you at that point for several years, but I learned so much more juicy stuff.
Yeah.
And like keeping things private. I am such an oversharer. I feel like this was a personal call out to me that you just gave, to keep things private. My husband doesn't need to know everything. He doesn't need to know what I talked about with my own therapist.
Yeah.
That is mine.
Which is different than secrets, right? Like secrets are
Yes.
like intentionally hiding something or withholding
Yes.
information that is pertinent to this person. That's a secret. Privacy is, oh, this is mine. Like I get to keep this sexy little thought about the gardener to myself. Like, you know, actually, no, my gardener's not very attractive, but you know,
But if he were, you
they
could keep that
were.
to yourself.
That would be mine. That's my
Hey,
sexy little thought that I get to keep, and that's okay. I don't have to share that with anybody. So it is
uh,
important to keep some of those things that again, I am me. My partner is them. We have a we, but like there is so much this sense of I that we want to protect when it comes to our relationships, when it comes to desire. So yes, keep some of that little mystery to yourself, Nicole.
uh, also bet it would create more fun and connection down the line. I know that he is much more, he doesn't overshare anything. He's really intentional about what he shares.
Yeah.
And later, something will come out, 5 years down the line. I'm like, you never told me that. It's like, well, it didn't come up. It's like,
Hmm.
how could you not have told me?
Yeah.
Well, that was his, and it came up, and now I'm even more intrigued 5 years later because I never knew this about you for 5 years. This is awesome.
Hmm.
Share more, say more.
Say more.
So there's something to say about that as well, kind of these nuggets we can drop over the course of a relationship versus just everything all at once all the time. But we want to leave you with some things to think on. First thing here is, how do I define love? And how do I define desire? How are they different? How are they the same? Where's the overlap? Do I view them as two opposing forces, or can they coexist? And can I desire the partner that I love very deeply? So can I still want to have sex with and have passionate sex with the person that I love and I view so safe? So
Yeah.
that is a lot of questions put into question one around what is love and what is desire.
And I think that I feel like this is just like a plug for Esther Perel. Like I think we've just created a whole episode on our love for Esther Perel. But it's kind of the sense of, can I want what I already have? Can I desire what I already have? Because if the desire is for the longing for the thing that I don't want, how can I create that sense of longing for this thing that is already there, for this partner who is secure, for this partner who is still present? So I think that, that kind of encompasses all the things that you were saying and all the questions that you were having, and it's important to look at all these pieces. And then I have a question too. So my questions all kind of feel very much along, my questions are all kind of along this realm of connection. So when do I feel most connected to my partner, and when do I feel suffocated? How do we balance the sense of intimacy with independence in our relationship? How can we nurture our own individual growth and relationship growth, right? So what are, essentially we have both of these needs, closeness and togetherness, and then we have this other need, which is individuality and this sense of self. How can these coexist? How can I be connected while not being suffocated by my partner, and how is that actually beneficial to both our individual selves and then the united self of the relationship?
For some of our listeners too, how can I not feel guilty when I choose to continue my own growth? And how can I not feel threatened by my partner's growth alongside mine? Uh, Final one on that same note is, what parts of myself have I neglected in my relationship, as I expect and I assume my partner to step into multiple roles for me, right? So have I lost that part of me that was really autonomous? Have I lost the part of me that was creative and liked to just pick up a book and spend an afternoon by herself at a coffee shop reading? What parts of myself have I neglected, and how can I get in touch with those parts again?
I love that. Yeah, so many questions. You don't have to answer them all.
Pick
But
one or two.
yeah, but we are therapists and we are always asking so many questions and coming up with questions. I think, we're not therapists. We're just like question masters. We're just like, how can I turn this into a question? Because
Yeah.
I can't actually tell you what you're supposed to do. So how do I ask you questions in the best possible way so that you can figure this out for yourselves? I think we're like magicians. If the questions feel too much, just take one at a time. Just kind of sit with one that really resonated with you. You don't have to answer it.
Thanks for joining us in this series. We'll see you next time. We are starting a new series. I'm starting next month, or next week, I should say. But yeah, this wraps up our whole desire series. I loved it. This was so juicy. It's one of my favorite topics, personally and professionally. So Thanks for joining this series, and we will see you next time.
See you then.
Bye.